welcome to everyone who's joining us live and to our fabulous panelists today. We're going to have a wealth of information shared with us in the Downlow on Cashflow webinar. For those of you less familiar with 10thousandgirl, we're a not-for-profit social enterprise that's set up to improve the financial well-being of Australian women. And our goal originally was to help 10,000 women across Australia, change their financial patterns and future picture. We have achieved that, and so we are keeping the momentum and with some really exciting changes and things to come in 2017. Our aim is to make finance social and fun and engaging. After all, it's such a thing that's intertwined through our every sort of decision and activity in our lives, and so it's really important to have a grasp. And so kudos to you for all of those of you listening to this session and educating and empowering yourself financially. So in the big picture, in this hour, we can only cover one small amount of information, but hopefully this will help you what we talk about today, because it's really about setting up the foundations and really being aware of what your current financial picture is. Then, once you've set your exciting goals, you know your starting point and you know your end point, and it's much easier to gather the relevant information and resources around you that you need to get from A to B. So we've all been in the situation where, we're paying the bills and we're staying afloat, but we're just not sure where our money goes. And budgeting, or what we'll call spending today, is not just a one-off thing. It's a dynamic thing that we have to have ongoing in our lives, because we might be really good at it one phase of our lives and then drop off the bandwagon. And it doesn't mean you need to be onto it at every moment of your life. It just means that every now and again we're checking in and we've got an awareness of our money patterns. And so then we don't get caught with that big expense and then oops, there it goes, and you find yourself struggling until the next payday. So putting a cash flow system in place is such an integral step in the sort of financial empowerment process. And we're going to talk today about it's a bit of a struggle sometimes. It's not one size fits all. Like, some of you will love a super detailed spreadsheet, and others might like to have an envelope system or set it up in a way that suits you and your lifestyle choices and your personality. So, and we each have a system that suits us best. So what we've decided to do is give you some different tips and perspectives from 3 financial planners joining us from across the country. We've got Lisa from Geraldton in WA, Matt from Armidale in New South Wales, and Amanda from Nowra. And each of them are going to share with us the strategies that they share with their clients. So we're really fortunate today to have these guys, and I'll introduce them in a minute. But Matt's going to kick us off with asking a big question: why budget? And take us through the thinking to get us started and motivated. And then Amanda and Lisa have these fabulous tips and strategies and ideas to really get yourself set up in a system that suits you, and set yourself up not just to survive but to thrive and save and invest and resource your goals into the future. So there's been some really great questions that have come through. So someone said, I've tried to budget on multiple occasions. Now I just feel like giving up. Help. So that's a common thing that we hear at the workshops as well. Someone else said, I want to know not just how to budget for day-to-day living expenses, but also how do I know if I'm saving and investing enough for the future. And then along these same lines, it seems like a lot of our money goes on interest repayments. What's a healthy ratio of living, paying, your mortgage, etc.? There's also another very relevant question that has come in about someone who is working as an independent contractor, and she says, I work as an independent contractor, which means I need to survive in a feast or famine world. I have a budget and know how much I need to survive each week, but I'm always struggling. Do you have any suggestions so I can go from surviving to living and thriving? And that's what we really want to talk about today. So 10,000 Girl, and this covers the panelists as well, we're not providing financial advice. 10,000 Girl doesn't provide financial advice, but these guys can only provide sort of general advice in a forum like this. And we really encourage you to obtain professional, independent financial advice before making major financial decisions, because the right advice at the right time can be quite transformative in your financial journey. So we can put on these free programs thanks to our generous partners. So we work with Financial Literacy Australia, which is a grants body governed by ASIC. We work with Rabobank, as we have done for many years now, the Financial Planning Association of Australia. So that is a great resource if you're looking for a financial planner, to make sure they're registered with one of the two industry bodies and they adhere to high code of ethics, etc. HESTA is an industry super fund that has a high proportion of female members, and they're really focused on educating their members. The ATO has some great resources, more and more usable on their website. Understand Insurance, another great resource that's run by the Insurance Council of Australia. And Credit Savvy, if you're interested in learning more about your credit score and how that works. So, a special welcome to our special guests, and a huge thank you for your time and for sharing your expertise. I'll let you introduce yourselves, Lisa and Matt and Amanda, as you do your different presentations, but you can find these guys' contact details and a little bit about their philosophy and the first steps that they take with clients on the 10,000 Girl Little Black Book page. So if you just go to 10thousandgirl.com connect, you'll find each of these guys and how to contact them. So just before we start, for those of you, we've had a few people just logging in now. If you're not familiar with the GoToWebinar system, on your control panel, there's a question box. Use this question box throughout the session to ask your questions and to make sure that you're maximizing the use of these really smart guys' time. So, Matt, I'm going to throw to you. Feel free to give a little bit of background on where you're coming from, and then we're really looking forward to your presentation. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Zoe, and I'd like to thank you all for being here today, taking the time to join the webinar. As Zoe said, my name's Matt Meehan, and I'm based in Armidale in regional New South Wales, and predominantly the clients that I service are regionally based, of course, and I suppose a lot, as the name suggests, AgBiz, a lot of the clients are farmers and obviously doing lots of different things for different people, and I suppose just getting straight into the presentation, before we get into budgeting, I'd just like to take you down a slightly different approach, and I suppose that's just giving you an idea of what we do here. And so that's to understand that there's another way of getting to where you want to get to. And so this approach really recognises that everyone's different, you're different, and so Zoe, if you could just move to the next slide, please. So, we're obviously going to get into budgeting, but your starting point is here. So previously, when meeting with clients, I would ask, how can we help you? And this would lead to the client's most burning or pressing issues, such as we're struggling to stick to a budget, and in fact we don't even have a budget. But these days, I suppose, recognising the burning issues such as budgeting and lack of cash flow are important. These days, in the words of Simon Sinek, who you can see on the screen there, we start with why. So before we jump straight into budgeting, we ask the question why. And so how do we do this? And if we could just move to the next slide, please. So in our meeting, and this is the approach we're using, before we prepare a budget, we really need to understand some key things. And so we ask you, what are your fundamental needs? So we start at the bottom of this, what we call outcomes map, and we ask, what are your fundamental needs? And often these are, they are similar with people, like, food on the table, happiness, freedom, paying the bills, less stress, all these sorts of things. And these are what we call fundamental or basic needs. So we all have these. And then moving upwards into those green boxes, that's where we're going to ask what your aspirations are.
Just cut out, Matt. Can people hear Matt?
I was able to.
Oh, yeah, righto. Good. Are you happy to keep going?
Hello?
Can you hear me? Zoe?
I can hear both of you.
You can, yeah, I can hear you. Is that Lisa?
That's Lisa here. I can hear all of you.
All right. Okay. Zoe might have lost me. I think we've lost Zoe.
Keep going, Matt. I think I've lost Zoe.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So look, I'll keep going. Then, so we're looking at in the green boxes here. We're looking at your aspirations, and so and this is where we recognise that everyone's different. We don't make any assumptions, and look, often these are similar sort of aspirations, such as the likes of travel and educating children and all those sorts of things. So this is what we call the why of why you need advice. And so ultimately we're going to get to budgeting, but in order to do a budget, we need to understand what your aspirations are, and also in conjunction with that, we need to understand if there are any complexities in your world that are getting in the way of you achieving the things you want to achieve. So these are important. And then finally, we need to understand the significance of you achieving these aspirations. So that's up in the yellow boxes up the top. So working through that, then we can we would do this every year. We'd start with a blank outcomes map so that we don't make any assumptions about you. So, because everyone's circumstances changed, you might decide you want to do something else with your career or whatever it is. And so we just don't want to make assumptions. And then ultimately, I understand the purpose of it today is about budgeting, but ultimately we're going to have a better and a deeper understanding of you as a person and be able to move to that next step with the likes of budgeting. So if we could just move to the next slide, please. Thanks, Zoe. And so the answers on your outcomes map, they represent the value of any advice, so and nothing else. So once we've undertaken this process, you'll be better placed to understand why you need to budget. So you just won't be budgeting for budgeting's sake, but budgeting with clear and specific aspirations written down. So now you're ready for the tools, and so that's what we call the what. So we focus on the why first, and then we move to the what in respect to the tools. So if we just move to the next page there, Zoe, please. And so then we move to the tools, and one such tool is the Money Smart website, and so that's got lots of calculators and all sorts of tips and I suppose general advice on there. And also, as Zoe mentioned, you know, you can go to the likes of the Financial Planning Association website. So just as a builder doesn't start building a house without plans, why would you want to start without plans of your own? So my initial discussion with you today is about the why, and so now we can move to the what, and so I'll hand over to the next advisor. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt. That's brilliant, and you're so spot on, as well as, of course, having to know where you're going. It also is a huge motivator then to get your sort of financial admin in order when you've linked it so closely to those sort of emotional and lifestyle and personal choices that you're creating in your life. So thank you very much, and it's really close to our hearts at 10,000 Girl, that philosophy too.
Thanks, Dave.
Hi, Amanda. Now, tell us a bit about your journey and what tips you have for us.
Afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Great to listen to Matt's initial point there on getting started with the why. Definitely, there's no point budgeting if you don't have a reason to actually do it to start with. So, excellent point there. So I own a financial planning practice in Nowra, and I suppose I wanted to start today with giving you some perspective as to how I started using the strategy that I use for clients for cash flow management. If I go back 5 years ago, I did not really manage my own money. Whilst my husband and I, we didn't struggle, we didn't really go without anything, but we didn't actually save for anything. We budgeted based on our bank balance. So if the bank balance was above our comfort zone, we'd probably spend a little bit more freely. If it was below, we'd tighten up. We really relied on things like our tax returns or childcare rebates to pay for larger items like holidays and stuff like that. And if we wanted a new car, we'd go and get a loan for it. My husband used to say to me, how can you be a financial planner and not be able to manage your own money? And it was a pretty valid point, but at the same time, realistically, most financial planners don't provide budgeting advice. You probably find maybe 5% of financial planners might actually do budgeting advice. Now, I'm not saying that I didn't know what I should be doing for budgeting. I'd actually tried it. I'd actually done a lot of traditional budgeting where I recorded a lot of my expenses, whether it be through an Excel tool or whether it be through specific applications or programs, or even I had used apps to record my expenditure. But I'm the typical lazy Gen Y who I'd record for a couple of months and then I would get over it. And I suppose I kind of probably didn't have a why either. So I would just give up, and it would have been pointless to have actually done it. So about 4 years ago, I came home and I said to my husband, look, I've got this idea that I want to try for managing our money. Can we give it a go? And his initial instinct was to say, no way, I'm not doing that. And I was a bit persistent and sort of said, look, come on, please, let's just try it. And reluctantly, he gave in. So 4 years later, he absolutely loves it, so do I, and he's probably a bigger advocate of the program we offer to clients than what I am. In the first 6 months of starting to do it, we saved $10,000 to pay for a family holiday to Cape York, something I don't believe that we would have been able to possibly have done if we had not managed our money more effectively. Once I had the confidence that it worked for me, I started to realise that this was a really good opportunity to actually go it out to my clients and help them with managing their cash flow as well. So we then spent 2 years after that building a tool that helped us do it for our clients, and 12 months ago we started to actually implement it with our clients. So what do we actually do? Zoe, if you want to flip to the next screen. So the first part of budgeting is we really need to sit down and actually make a money plan. So how are we going to spend our money? It's really important to sit down, go through, record your expenses, work out where you're wanting to spend your money. One of the biggest things and most important things about doing this is I believe it's really important that you do this as a couple. So a lot of the time clients will have one member of the couple will understand the finances and the other one doesn't. For this to work, it's really important that you both understand it. For one particular client in particular that I recall sitting down with, because the wife had completed everything, I thought, no, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to go through the expenses with both of them so that they both understand their position. And at the end of going through it with them, the husband, out of the blue, turned around and said, I now understand why, when I asked for $20 for protein powder, she says no. For the first time ever, he understood their financial position. They were in the negative, so they couldn't afford everything. And she was trying to balance it, but he didn't understand that. So they had a lot of arguments about money because he didn't understand it. So really, really important that you both become involved with working out where you're going to spend your money. The second thing is to be really honest about your expenditure. If you don't put it in correctly, it's not going to work. Because I personally complete a lot of these with clients, I tend to pick up mistakes. I tend to see when somebody's overestimated or underestimated on things, so I will bring it up and actually sort of just double question that it is actually correct. Part of the benefits of actually seeking advice is that someone else from a third-party perspective can actually point out some of those mistakes, which does minimise the risk of failure and also minimise the risk of reworks as well. Once you have everything in there and you know what your position is, you're going to find out whether you have a surplus or whether you have a deficit. It's really important, obviously, that you live within your means. In this day and age, I find pretty much probably 2 in 3 clients are probably in the negative that I sit and do this with, these are clients that think that they manage their money quite well. So it's quite often that it's not the case. Once you've worked it out, if it is a negative, you need to sit down and actually cut back on expenses, whether that be scrutinising your bills or cutting back on your personal expenses. You have to bring it back into a surplus. If it is a surplus, on the other hand, you need to spend that money. If you don't spend that money, you've got surplus and you're going to waste it. So whether it be allocating that money to your mortgage or savings or investments, it just has to be allocated so you don't waste it. Okay, Zoe, if you want to flip to the next screen. So once you've actually, that'll be enough, yeah, that's fine. Once you've actually worked out what you're going to spend your money on, you need to actually control your spending. This is where our non-traditional method comes in. A lot of budgeting strategies put aside an amount for fixed expenses, and whatever is left you can spend. We prefer to actually put aside discretionary spendings because they're the things that you're most likely to overspend on, and they're the things that actually need to be controlled. We believe in breaking things down and using multiple bank accounts to control our spending. Every week we pay an amount into our main account, so our pay goes into our main account, and then we pay all our fixed and non-discretionary bills from our main account. We then transfer an amount out into designated accounts for our discretionary spending as well. So if I was to break it up a little bit for you, so you'll see that we've got the groceries account, which is probably an unusual one, but it's probably my biggest budget saver, because for us personally, we spend a lot on groceries and we blow our budget predominantly in this area. And I suppose the end of the week rolls around, and because of having this strategy, if I've got no money left in our grocery account at the end of the week, we have to pay for it from our own account. We can't just draw the money from our main account. It just forces us to make an informed decision. And if we can't afford it, because we've spent all our grocery money, it means that we might even just have to not be lazy and actually cook something. So that one, there's a pretty good one for minimising that takeaway bills. Obviously, the next one round is holidays, which is probably self-explanatory. If you want to go on holiday, you really need to put the money aside. Next one's gifts, really, really good, particularly right now when Christmas is rolling around. I've put the money aside throughout the year for all our presents, so the money's sitting there and I don't have to stress about how much is actually needed to buy all those Christmas presents. Then you'll see down the bottom that we've got the children's account. The children's account, for me as a mum, I was blowing my budget, particularly here. Winter would roll around and I'd go and buy all the new clothes for the season, and I'd probably spend a lot more and buy a lot more on clothes than what I probably should have. So a really, really important one. It helps make sure that you know how much you've got to spend, and if you've got nothing left and you're spending more than that, it means you're blowing your budget. So you can see at any given time exactly how much money you've got to spend. Then there's the marriage saver accounts, pretty much, the don't ask accounts. So these are probably been the best part about the strategy, and that is we get our own money every week. And if I was to go back 5 years ago, my husband used to say to me all the time, oh, so how much did you pay for that dress? Or when did you get those shoes? And honestly, I was the person that would reply, oh, it was $20 and it really cost $30. So I probably wasn't honest why. It was only $10, but I did it. And I suppose by having our own accounts, we don't have to actually explain ourselves to each other about our decisions on what we spend our money on anymore. And that gives us the freedom to not feel guilty about our purchases. It also makes us think more about what we purchase. I used to spend a lot on small items, but he used to spend a lot on bigger items. But he would feel guilty about the bigger items. And I suppose by having our own money, it's made us stop and think about the small purchases, because all of a sudden we don't feel guilty about spending a little bit more on those more expensive items for ourselves. So breaking it right up on those discretionary can really help, because they're the things that are actually going to blow your budget. I suppose the other thing is by doing all this, there's going to be times where you're going to break the budget. But when you do it, you make an informed decision to break the budget, and you know exactly where you stand all the time. So it just helps put it into perspective as to what's going on. Zoe, I'll get you to skip the next one. So how do you
put these all up? You can talk through them.
What was that, sorry?
I'll pop them all up, then you can go with your own flow.
Excellent. So how do you implement this type of strategy? So firstly, you've got to actually sit down and actually work out which accounts you need. Pay particular attention to things like your bank account fees. Some will pay, you're going to have to pay for, but when you look at the actual result of it all, you probably find, even if you do have to pay for a couple of bank account fees, it's probably worthwhile doing. But there are accounts that you can do that are fee-free, so definitely consider those when you're actually looking at them. Set up your weekly transfers between your accounts so that it automatically goes through, so you're not having to manually process anything. When you're actually setting up your bank accounts as well, just be really careful to think about your cards and which ones you need cards on. Particularly, we use a card on our main account because we want that for when we're paying for example, a doctor's appointment or something like that. Then we also have an account on our own Don't Ask accounts, and we also have a card on our grocery account. Everything else, things like the holiday account, you go on holidays, transfer the money into your grocery account. You would have been spending the money from the groceries anyway on holidays, so use the grocery account so that you don't have to have another card in your wallet. If you've make sure you've got online banking and stuff like that, so that or apps on your phone, so that if you bought something for the children, later on, just try pay for it out of your own account or the main account, later on fix it up and transfer it back. It just minimises how many cards you have in your wallet, which was the reason why my husband actually originally said no to doing the strategy. And the other thing is, at the beginning, you're going to have shortfalls. The first week we did it was the beginning of the winter season. My daughter went to a Catholic school and she needed new winter uniforms for school, and there wasn't enough money in the account. You can do IOUs. So there's going to be times where you're going to do an IOU, stick a post-it note on the fridge, or put a little reminder somewhere that you need to pay that money back, and make sure you actually do. The next thing is just use a trial and error approach. Sometimes you might have something not quite right. At one point, my husband and I, we pay $50 to each other a week. And at one point, I put it up to $75 because we thought it was a little bit tight. And then I started to notice that we were wasting a lot of our money because we had that little bit more to spend. So we talked about it and we dropped it back to the 50 again. So just pay attention to what's happening. Do you have enough? If it's not, go back and actually review it. And if things change, if your pay goes up, go back, review it, make sure that you're not actually wasting that pay rise by just spending it because you know you've got that little bit of a surplus. So this can be done for people that aren't struggling, but it can also benefit people that are struggling financially, because it allows you to see exactly how much money you've got to spend, as opposed to not being quite sure on what you've got to spend as well. So that's our strategy. Hopefully it helps. I'll pass it back to you, Zoe.
We seem to have lost Zoe, so maybe I can take over now. My name's Lisa Farnell and I'm a financial advisor in Geraldton, which is Western Australia. So thanks to Amanda and Matt so far for their presentations. I like Matt's idea of starting with the end in mind. I think it's vital that you know what your goals are and what you're aiming for when you actually start your budgeting or your cash flow journey. And Amanda's had some great tips there for how she got her house in order. The important thing is figuring out where your money currently goes, and there's often a disconnect between what your goals are and the reality of where your money is currently going. Before I get started on my presentation, there was a question earlier in the day from someone saying they felt they were paying a lot of interest, and what's a healthy balance? That's a great question, and I'm not sure that there's a magic number there, but it did remind me of a quote by a man called Will Rogers. And Will said that too many people spend money they haven't earned to buy things they don't want to impress people they don't like. And I think that's a pretty valid quote sometimes, and I guess that goes back to Matt and figuring out what your goals are and what you really want to achieve. I think we often find ourselves not buying from need, but buying from capacity. If you think about buying a home, the temptation is often to go to the bank and figure out how much the bank will lend you, and then start looking for houses in that price range, instead of thinking about this house that you actually need for you or your family and looking along those lines. And you'll often find yourself looking for a house that's a lot more expensive than the house you actually needed. So I don't know whether that helps the person that asked that question, but hopefully I think it's just a case of figuring out some balance and not necessarily going for what you can just afford.
And that links in with Amanda's point, doesn't it, Lisa, about trial and error and setting up your system like that $50, $75 example, setting it up and being tight on yourself, but then if you needed to be more lenient and working out a happy medium, and so you're setting up your system that's realistic, and that stops that wastage.
That's correct, yeah. So my role today was really just to bring some tips that have worked for me or for my clients. For me, the first thing really is you've got to pencil in your fun. When you're doing your budget, you can't take the fun out of your lifestyle. It's like a diet. I'm not sure how many have tried the no sugar diet. Sounds fabulous, and I'm sure it's a really sound idea, but the reality of actually doing that is it's ridiculously hard. And what you find is that instead of just reducing your sugar intake, which is probably healthy, you just go, too hard, and go back to whatever it was you were doing. And same with your diet. And same with your money, sorry. You need to include fun in your spending program or your budget, but perhaps start limiting the amount you spend on it. And my big tip here is to use cash. You have a better control of your spending if you use cash. For me, I allocate myself $100 a week for whatever I want. And I guess that's Amanda's don't ask account, really. I take $100 cash out, and that's my do whatever I want with. That's my massage, pedicure, my lunch, whatever. Interestingly, I don't always use it. Often find I have that money left at the end of the week, but it's there if I want it, and I don't feel, that's my don't feel guilty money. So for those of you who are somewhat younger than me, your fun might be going out for a few drinks on the weekend. I'm not here to make any moral judgment on your weekend, but if you usually spend upwards of $100 on a night out, consider reducing it. Maybe you put $50 in your budget. And if you put $50 in your budget, then take $50 cash with you and don't take your card. It doesn't feel like you're spending money when you put it on your card. You don't feel it quite the same as handing over cash. And if you've got your card with you, that impulse at 3 a.m. to buy another bottle of champagne is not necessarily achievable if you haven't got a card with you. So pencil in your fun, but use cash for that fun. It's not a case of not doing things you enjoy, but rather thinking about whether or not the cost of that fun's worth feeling perpetually broke or financially out of control for. Can we go to the next one, Zoe? So the next tip there, and I guess Matt and Amanda and I hadn't met each other and hadn't compared our slides, but a lot of our message is overlapping. Pay yourself first. Include holiday savings, emergency savings, retirement savings, kids' education savings, or your charitable gifting in your budget. Don't make it an afterthought or something that you're going to do if you have spare money at the end of the month, because there invariably isn't spare money at the end of the month if you don't plan. And as Zoe said, consider using a number of, Amanda said, consider using a number of online bank accounts if you need to. A lot of my clients find that having them earmarked for different things works well, and they'll give each account a nickname. So you might have the Europe account. If you desperately want to go to Europe in 2 years' time, put an account with its name on it. And then every pay, transfer a set amount. You know, it works like this. If your holiday budget is $6,000 and you paid fortnightly, that's about $230 a fortnight to put aside into your holiday account. Same for your emergency money. If you feel better having money aside in case of emergency, then start squirreling it away. It is a good peace of mind knowing that if something unexpected comes up, you're prepared for it. By unexpected, I don't mean a sale at your favourite dress shop. And your retirement's no different. For some of you, if you're a bit younger, retirement's going to feel like forever away, but the power of compound returns really is your friend, and starting small early is going to give you rewards down the track when you do actually want to stop working. There's some powerful psychology in this approach. You're less likely to raid a bank account that has a name. You know, if going to Europe is really important to you, yeah, you're less likely to pull money out of the Europe account for something that's not quite as important. So whatever it is that's important to you, plan for it and put it in your budget. Next one, Zoe.
It's great because you're all sharing, as you said, Lisa, the same messages about the importance of it's not a budget isn't just a a black and white tool. It's about shifting your whole focus to the things that are most important to you and using that as your day-to-day motivator. You're pour that bottle of champagne. You're always making decisions, but if you're clear and your system's set up to support your really exciting goals, it makes boring budgeting a lot more realistic, doesn't it?
That's right. So my next tip then is to be real. Once you've got a handle on your expenditure, split it into fixed costs and discretionary costs. And fixed costs are things that you really can't change. Your rent or your mortgage payments, your insurance, your rates, electricity, fuel, food. Discretionary costs, though, stuff you can control. Clothes, sport, entertainment, alcohol, eating out. So carefully analyse the discretionaries. This is where you can make the savings, and this is where the leakage happens. By leakage, I mean that gap in your budget where on paper you have a surplus income, but you wonder where on earth it went. The $300 per fortnight that the budget says you have left over, which is never in your bank account, that's leakage. You've probably all heard the stuff about savings you can make by taking your own lunch to work and not buying coffees, and it sounds boring, but it's all true. My biggest leakage was magazines until I discovered Pinterest, and now I don't spend money on magazines because I spend my time doodling around on Pinterest instead. So figure it out what it is you're prepared to forego for the greater good, or what lower cost option you can substitute it with. They seem like small savings. It's only $8 for a magazine, or a coffee's only $5. In WA, a coffee's $5. I think it's cheaper where you guys are. But if you can save $50 a week on these small ticket items, that's $2,500 a year. And that, my friends, is a trip to Bali. The way I look at it, I'll create better memories from a holiday with my family and friends than I will from buying a convenient lunch or flicking through some junk magazine I'm going to throw away in a few hours' time. So it's really a case of changing your thinking about what's important to you. Again, this isn't me projecting my values onto your lifestyle. It's about you guys figuring out what you really want and eliminating the expenditure that doesn't help you get there and doesn't add real value to your lifestyle. Next one, Zoe. Decide once. I learnt this at a conference only a few months ago, and it made a big difference to me in a number of ways. For one, I apply it daily to my exercise. I decide the night before that I'm going riding or running. I get my gear ready. When the alarm goes off, I go riding or running. Now that sounds simple, but in the past, I find myself lying in bed and renegotiating my exercise plans in my head. And you might do the same. It goes like this. I'm feeling a bit tired. I don't feel great. Maybe I should listen to my body and just do some stretches. And 20 minutes later, I'd still be lying there doodling around in my head with what I was going to do. Now I just go because I decided the night before that I would. And 99% of the time, I'm really pleased I did. So it's exactly the same with your money. Once you've set your cash flow or your budget, that's it. Don't keep renegotiating it in your head just to justify some discretionary spending that you haven't planned. Now, as Amanda said, this doesn't mean you can't review your budget from time to time. That's fine. But once you've set it, decide once to stick to it. And finally, I don't have a slide for this, but my final point here is to reconsider debt. You might consider a credit card or a store card to be debt, but it is debt. It's certainly not an asset. And if you're not paying it off fully every month, then you're paying a really heavy interest penalty for not living within your means. My earlier advice around cash applies here too. If you're going clothes shopping and your budget was $200, just take $200, and that way you then have to spend it mindfully rather than just getting out the card and letting things get out of control. The same goes from a car loan. From a financial perspective, a car loan is just bad debt. You generally find that once you've driven your flash new car out of the car yard, it's worth less than the debt you have on it. So my advice is to save for these big ticket items and limit bad debt. Note that not all debt's bad, but I'm pretty sure that's for another seminar. So there's a number of tools available to get your spending plan sorted. we have our own spreadsheets available for clients that I'm happy to share, or just Google it. I think the Money Smart website has budget plans as well. It doesn't matter if you use the back of an envelope, just start planning. And I think just before I hand back to Zoe, there was one more question from someone about they have a pretty lumpy income and they're not quite sure how to manage it. Again, there's no magic bullet here, but I understand what you're going for. When I started my business, my financial planning business 10 years ago, and even now the cash flow is pretty lumpy. Some months you seem to be rolling in money, and other months there's not enough to make ends meet. So again, that's really getting a handle on your expenditure, and in the months where you do have surplus cash flow, making sure that you don't think the world is a wonderful place and just go and spend it all, but pop it into those multiple accounts that you've set up so that, you know, for the lean months you still might have some cash in the bank to pay for the bills as they come in. It's not easy, but I guess as time goes by and you start generating some surplus into those different accounts, it does certainly get easier as you go along. So I'll hand back to you, Zoe.
Thanks so much, Lisa. And just to extend on that point, I think that most people in small business and contracting, and especially in seasonal businesses like farming, you know, one, they have got a handle on it, or they absolutely, you have to have a handle on your cash flow and your emergency buffers, and the longer you can sort of be on top of your finances and track it, the easier it becomes, doesn't it? Because you start to be familiar with those patterns, and you know that in that certain time of the year there's going to be a dip, so you either need cash available or an overdraft or something. So it's all about learning along the way. It's not going to be this magical thing that all of a sudden everything's right. Our financial journeys are these dynamic things that travel with us our whole lives, and so we hope that all we're doing is improving it every day and every month and each year. So I just want to say thank you to each of you so much for your perspectives. It is, Amanda, your refreshing honesty about your own journey is quite inspiring, and I'm sure will resonate with quite a few people, as over a short time you can make really transformative changes in your life. And Lisa, you've shown how, you know, you did that with your business cash flow, and Matt, you really talked about the pinnacle of planning and budgeting and making sure we've got that why and those motivators in place. So I'm going to throw it to those of you online now, and there is a couple of great questions that have come through, and then perhaps I will ask each of you to share, to wrap up, to share your thoughts on how you can go from, you know, that sort of surviving, so, you know, you're just managing paycheck to paycheck or budget to budget, and to actually thriving. So there's been quite a few sort of questions and thoughts on this recently, on, you know, and even those questions on the ratio of, you know, saving, investing, and living and spending. So we've talked a bit about, you know, having money for living and spending, but how about for that, you know, planning for the future, and any tips you have on that? So there's a question from Sue that's come through. You mentioned online accounts. Are there fee-free ones? I tend to not keep money in separate accounts because of the fees that leak out. Any ideas? So I'll throw to you, maybe Amanda and Lisa, you both mentioned this.
So most online accounts are fee-free accounts, and there are a lot of banks, if you've got a mortgage, they'll tend to give you free accounts off the side of it as well. But I suppose probably the biggest thing that I would say is, if you were trying to manage your cash flow through a program, you're probably going to be spending spending a bit on that actual program, or like I design the programs to be that my clients can actually do it themselves and they don't spend anything extra. So the only costs that they might have sometimes are the bank fees. And I think there was one I did the other day where they had most of their accounts in online savings accounts, but we had 3 accounts that, based on where their mortgage was, they would end up having to pay fees on those accounts. So they had a $5 fee, so I think it was about $180 a year for them to be able to see all the time exactly where their money is and how much they've got to spend. So I suppose, yes, there are fee-free accounts, there's quite a lot of them, but even if you are paying for it, you may find the benefits actually outweigh how much you're actually spending.
Yeah, thinking of that big picture, I know that my husband and I had that conversation a couple of years ago where we split an offset account. So we had, play money and saving money, and it does cost us $10 a month to have that extra account. But what we save from the smarts around that is more than $120 a year. So it was sort of weighing up that bigger picture. Lisa, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there are a number of online banks that don't have branches that have completely fee-free accounts. Most of the standard banks will also have an online account, but they might limit how many of those you can open, but the online banks don't seem to provide that limit. And Zoe's right, if you do have a mortgage, using your mortgage offset or your redraw facility can also be a really cost-effective way of saving for, or using that as a separate account. I do counsel caution here though, if you're not a disciplined spender, then using a redraw facility on your home loan's probably not your best approach. But it can be useful if you are really disciplined around your saving. So saving, for example, your kids' education money into your mortgage and then redrawing it down the track as and when you need it, can be a really cost-effective way. Okay, Zoe has said that her internet keeps cutting in and out. If there's more questions, perhaps you can put them in the chat box and we can see if we can answer them as best we can without Zoe.
All right, sorry, I don't know what's happening with my computer audio. Anyway, there's no specific questions no more specific questions that have come through. So maybe we'll wrap up by each of you sharing your final sort of thought to wrap up this session and to really help people work towards thriving financially.
I might make a start there, Zoe. So actually I'd like to wrap up just by going to that person that had a dilemma with the contractor, so the whole feast or famine and moving from surviving to thriving. And I suppose I had a discussion with a client the other day around budgeting, and we worked out what he was earning and what all these expenses were, and it became pretty clear there was only really a couple of things we could really do there, and one of them was to look at the top line, which was his income. And so I've got my own business, and I assume the contractor who has the question here has his or her own business, and so what you could really look at there possibly, and obviously without knowing fully what the business is what are you charging, and are you charging enough? And sometimes, in business we just don't have that courage to put our best foot forward in respect of the fee that we charge, and it's a difficult conversation to have, but is it possible when we're quoting for a job or doing something like that that we say, well, okay, well maybe I'm going to up my rate, and let's see, if by doing that, are we going to miss out on much? Possibly we may miss out on the odd job, but if on balance we're winning more jobs than we're losing, and we're getting a better fee, and obviously if we're backing ourselves and we feel we do a really good job, then obviously that's going to have an impact on our cash flow. So, and also getting the bills out and getting paid in good time, obviously all those sorts of things are important as well. So just thought I'd go back to that particular question that we had earlier. So thanks everyone, and thanks Zoe.
Thanks, Matt. Any final thoughts from you, Lisa or Amanda?
I would just...
Sorry,
go on.
I probably throw an extra thing in that I find regularly when I'm sitting with clients doing their cash flow is you have enormous credit cards, right, or store purchases. I find them to be one of the biggest things that break people's budget. If you can't afford it outright, you probably can't afford it from a weekly perspective either. Often I'll sit there and they'll have multiple cards, but they might be interest-free, but they still affect your budget. So if you're going to go and get stuff like that, if that's the only means that you have to do it, you still have to sit down and actually work out your budget and work out if you can actually afford the repayments. It's really, really crucial. Great,
Amanda. I'm glad you brought that up. Lisa, a final word of wisdom from you?
Start your planning with the end in mind. If you know what it is that you want to achieve, you'd be happier to stick to some of the smaller sacrifices, if you like, if it's for the greater good, if there's something bigger that you want to achieve with your money. So, you know, I guess not making purchases of things you don't want to impress people you don't like, but planning for things that you do want and putting the small stuff aside.
And I found, Lisa, that once you really get in that planning mode and you're so focused on, you know, the key goals and those things in your life that are really important to you, the little things it actually doesn't even feel like you're sacrificing, because you're so focused on, you know, achieving and enjoying those sort of, you know, medium and long term and sometimes short term as well goals, that those day-to-day things, they just disappear from your life. So there is that transition period, but then it's not always a sort of a day-to-day decision struggle. Well, that's my experience as well. And yeah, so thank you each really hugely for your expertise today. I'm sorry my audio has dropped in and out a little bit, and so I hope that that hasn't been too disturbing for you or others. Thank you for those who emailed in questions. Thank you for those who asked questions. There's a couple of a good action here. Action for me: review my cash flow budget more regularly and set up accounts for specific purposes. To keep things separate will be key for me. And so your message has certainly got through to at least one of our live participants. So thank you also, of course, to our generous partners who allow us to run these programs for free. And if you want more, there's heaps of other resources on the website, and there's a few really exciting things to come in 2017. There's also an ethical investing webinar coming up next week, if that's something you're interested in. Thank you again to each of you who've joined us live, or if you're listening to the recording, and thank you again to our experts. Adios and happy planning.
Thanks, Zoe. See ya.
Thanks, Zoe.
Thanks, Zoe.
Thanks. Great.